One of the biggest, most practical topics when it comes to AI right now, and that has been about AI actually in the last several years, are bots. And bots for our website, bots to handle calls. What are bots and how do we use them? And how do we actually use them to grow our business? And today we have a good friend of mine, Matt Leitz, who is the expert in bots at BotBuilders.com. And so, Matt, if you would give us a little bit of just your background and why you started dealing with bots.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, super excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Tom. So, like many great things that happened by total accident, at the time I was running a board game company called BoardGames.com. And frankly, we were struggling. We were getting our butts kicked by Amazon. Nothing was going well. And I had heard about these chatbot things, and this was back in 2017. And I thought, hey, what the heck? We need to do something. And when we built that first chatbot, which ran only on Facebook, that was the only place that it ran. It was the only thing that we did that was working, frankly. And I was actually a little late to bots. There was a lot of, marketing hype around it, and it was, this new cool thing. I was a little bit hesitant at first because my misconception was, hey, chatbots are going to create a very poor customer experience. Every business that I've ever ran has always been wrapped around taking care of people, human touch. And I just assumed that, having bots would be cold. And, I mean, our company was a board game company. The whole purpose was to create, more human connection. But what I learned is that a well done chatbot doesn't create less connection. It actually can create more because ultimately it gives an opportunity for, a customer or potential customer to engage with you. And then at any point in time, you could always hand that off to a human, but just being able to get that conversation started is the biggest thing.
So when did you start doing this? How long ago?
So we launched BotBuilders in January of 2018.
Okay.
So we've been playing with AI and all this stuff, far before it was cool. And we've just seen, the thing that really attracted me to it was the fact that there's always going to be chat. I mean, we just, as a human species, at least for years to come, I don't see us stopping,
Right.
sending text-based messages to each other. And it's really kind of wild because now, even though then it started on Facebook Messenger, then, Instagram, and then on your website, now text message, SMS, because everybody's got a phone. So it's the channels. I mean, now TikTok is open and all this kind of stuff. And I think that the irony of it is, years ago, I did learn to master these automation tools. And I think a lot of times when people hear about AI and bots, you get a little nervous around the technology. But the truth of the matter is there's no need to code. There's nothing technical. And most of the bots that we build are a combination of drag and drop builders. If you could imagine kind of a choose your own adventure kind of thing where, oh, they click this button, then it responds with this, and just plugging in, existing AI. So, we don't build the, open AI and the perplexity and, all these, Claude, I'm sure a lot of people on here have used. What we do is we take that technology and we plug it in, and we've just become the best at using these tools to help companies with support, right? But we specialize more in the sales and marketing end.
Okay. So let's back up a little bit if we can,
Absolutely.
Matt, because sometimes we tend to assume people know what we do and what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I want to back up into that. I know from my profession, people rarely know anything about tax except that they have to pay it. And so I always start from the very basics. So, if you
Sure.
will, explain what actually is a bot.
Love it. Okay, so a chatbot is a two-way automated system that can live on various platforms, as I mentioned. So you can put a bot onto your website. You can have it integrated into your social media, right? So it can be on your Facebook page.
Oh,
It can
so it can
be
actually
attached to your Instagram.
it can actually be you.
100%. Yeah. So now I will say this. Okay. So just imagine a bot is an automated two-way conversation that's happening. Now, it doesn't just need to be chat. We'll talk more about voice because you mentioned that. That's something that's very, very exciting. But ultimately, what's exciting about it is that when somebody sends a message, via voice or via text, the bot can automatically respond with an intelligent reply. And depending on how you've trained that bot, and I'm happy to get into more details on that, it could really do just about any function that you can imagine. And,
Well,
you know, so
so give us an example of that. So take a really
absolutely.
simple example
Yep,
everybody would relate to, where maybe it's customer service, right?
you got it.
Answering questions about your product, et cetera. So how does that actually happen? I'm looking for what's really happening behind the scenes so that it
Absolutely.
can actually answer intelligently, because I think that's one of the things I've noticed with AI is if you ask a stupid question, you get a stupid answer on AI, right? I mean, seriously, if you ask a
Sure.
bad question, you're going to get a bad answer, and bad answers are worse than no answers. So how do you, how does the bot work so that it's not giving bad or incorrect information?
Love it. So if you just imagine, let's just say on your website, classic example, okay? Someone goes to your website, there's a little sort of, widget, those little bubbles in the bottom right-hand corner, they click on it, a window opens. And you might have seen this on your bank website or something like that. Now, here's what I will say is that having a chatbot and having a good chatbot are two different things.
Sure.
And a lot of times these big corporations are kind of known for having horrible experiences. And there's also the fact that a lot of these bots that were built in early days didn't have as good of AI behind it, et cetera. So if you've experienced a chatbot and had a bad experience, know that that's not abnormal, but also don't discredit that, right? So to answer your question, okay, you've got this little widget on your website, and somebody comes and they're, interacting with it. Well, what it's doing is it's taking any sort of training information that you've provided to it. Okay, now that could be that you've answered some FAQs inside of your chatbot program. Okay. And just imagine that, could you custom code a chatbot? Of course you could, but in this day and age, you're just going to use a pre-existing bot platform that does 90% of the heavy lifting. Okay. So when you go in there, there'll, just be a section that says, okay, what do you want to train this bot on? And it might say, give us some frequently asked questions, or it might say, give us your website. And you put your website in there, and the bot goes and reads your website so it understands more about your company. Or you could, say, hey, let's just say Tom, right, has written, a best-selling book. Tom could literally get a PDF for his website, feed it into the chatbot, and now the bot knows everything about Tom's book. All right. So you start when you're training a bot with the underlying data. Okay. So just imagine this is just the, you know,
You're just
the
feeding it data.
you're feeding it data. So that's half of the battle right there. Okay. And that's it's kind of basic, but the other half is the basically the parameters that you give it. Okay. And parameters probably too fancy of a word. Just like when you use ChatGPT, let me step back from this. Most people on here probably use ChatGPT or something like it, right? And that is a chatbot. So the same way that you prompt, right, that you put information into the AI, in the back of any chatbot platform, there's going to be a box that just says, hey, put a prompt in here, right? Some of them are a little fancier than others, but some of them are literally as simple
Yeah.
as, tell the bot, what personality do you want your bot to have? How focused do you want the bot to be on only answering questions in regards to Tom's book or pulling from the rest of the data? So basically just imagine that you're writing a prompt. And this is why BotBuilders exists, is to help people with this, because I know that this probably sounds like a lot at face value, but at the same time, I could train, somebody in a series of videos how to do this very effectively, and none of it is rocket science, right? Literally, Elon and the rocket scientists are doing the hard work, and we're just kind of tapping into this thing. So, again, just to kind of recap, so imagine you've got a chat bot. This is a little widget, an interactive thing that people can communicate with back and forth on your website, and in the back end of this, in the bot platform, and we've got our own system called Automator AI. There's a tool called Mini Chat, which is spelled MANYCHAT, which is a very popular bot platform that we've used for years. And there's many others. But just in the back end of this, you're giving it any training data, your book, your PDF. You could give it a link to your frequently asked questions on your website. You could connect it to your knowledge base. I mean, so many different ways. And then you're telling it what you want it to do. Okay. Be professional, stick to the script. And beyond that, probably the most important thing is to establish what the goals are. Okay. So this is the biggest thing. And this goes beyond just having your own chat bot. All right. This is if you're using ChatGPT or really any AI. All right. Because Tom, you made a point that the quality in definitely affects the quality out. Okay. But if you just stick to this rule, because there was a point in time where when AI came out, way back when AI came out, right? When it was the prompting was such the science and everybody was like, oh, I got the perfect prompt. Here's the reality. AI is so good right now that you don't need to know any secret magic when it comes to prompting. Okay. And in fact, I'll leave this for your people because if you just follow this rule, you're going to do great with AI. And that's just to be very specific about what you want the desired outcome to be. Okay. That is the most important thing. Okay. In fact, if you wanted to just use one prompt for the rest of your life on ChatGPT, it would be this. Okay. It would be, my goal is blank. What do you need from me to do it as effectively as possible? Right. And remembering that it's a collaborative process. And I don't want to get too meta here, Tom, but the thing about AI that I think a lot of times it's kind of like an unlock to really get more out of AI is realizing that the best way to get better at AI is to get help from AI with AI. So for example, right, I'm sitting here explaining to you how to train a chat bot such that it's going to effectively so that you have a prompt that's going to tell the chat bot what you want it to do. You know how I would do that? Is I would go to ChatGPT and I'd say, I am trying to write the perfect prompt for my chat bot that I'm putting on my website. What do you need from me to help me do it? And in ChatGPT would say, oh, okay, here's 7 questions that I need you to answer. All right. And you would answer those 7 questions. And the end result is ChatGPT would say, okay, here's your prompt. And you would take that prompt and you would copy it into the bot platform.
So
So
really the key sounds like is to get the AI to prompt you with the questions,
yes, it is.
right?
Exactly.
Which is really the issue. I mean, I think baby boomers actually have a little advantage with AI because we had what you would call really early AI, where we used Boolean connectors. I don't know if you even know what a Boolean connector is, way
No.
before your time. This is where you have to say, I'm searching for this term within 5 words of this term, but not related to this term. So you really had to be precise in exactly what your search was. That was the earliest really search engine, which was a tool called LexisNexis, which was back in the 80s
Yeah.
when that was available, 70s and 80s when it was very first created. So where some of us have spent a lifetime learning how to ask those questions. Okay, so I think this is a really important point that having AI actually help you know what the question should be
You got it.
rather than just ask the question is
You
a
got it.
much superior way to use AI. Because if you're asking the question, why are you asking the question when you don't know what question you should be asking?
You got it. 100%.
Right. I
And
like
just
that.
knowing that alone is a complete unlock. And anybody that just heard this last 2 minutes knows how to use AI better than the majority of people on YouTube that are saying,
Oh, for
"Oh,
sure.
this prompt and all," like literally that is it. Because it's like you said. I mean, it's going to know what it needs to produce better results, better than what you're going to do. So why are you going to sit there and try to figure out how to write a perfect prompt when you just say, "Hey, what do you need from me for us
Right,
to
about
achieve the
something you
goal?"
don't know much about, right? I mean, you
100%.
can write. I mean, I think that people can actually write better prompts than AI if you really have the background for doing it, if you're a professional. But I think that if you're not, that makes total sense. Okay, so you're going to have this AI, and you're talking about a particular goal that you want to accomplish. So let's talk about some practical applications. The obvious one is the website, but one of the challenges we have with the website, of course, is Perplexity, Claude, and ChatGPT, in that no longer is it necessarily where they're going, right? Because
Mm,
it's what you ask a question, it gives you an answer. Now, I know at least with Perplexity, which is the one I use the most, is it will also always give you the source. And then you click on the source, it does take you to the website. So one of my questions is, so when let's say you do a search on AI, and we'll take my company. It's fine. Okay,
sure.
you're searching for tax advisor. Okay, a tax advisor, and what makes a great tax advisor, and it actually brings you to chapter 23 in my book, How to Find a Good Tax Advisor, right? So which we then, if we have that on our website, that brings them into the website. Excuse me. So if that's the case, then when they come into the website, that chatbot needs to be at any place they come into the website, right? So it
For sure.
can't just be on your homepage, because
Yeah.
people aren't using homepages that much anymore.
Right. No, absolutely. And most of the time, and without getting into the technical stuff of it, they'll give you like a little, I hate to say the word code because it sounds super scary, but just imagine that you're copying, pasting the little code snippet that they give
Got
you
it.
into a particular box. Because depending on who built your website, you might use a WordPress site or
Right.
some kind of click funnel or go
Yep.
high level, but they all have a box that you can kind of paste a code into. And once you do that, it'll just appear on the whole
Got
thing.
it. Got it. Got
Yep.
it. Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So pretty simple there. Now you use, if I understand right, you use bots a lot for marketing. And
Absolutely.
so how do you do that? What is kind of, if we're thinking about, hey, uh, I want to use bots for marketing, which I really hadn't thought about until I got to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
How would you do that? So kind of walk us through what you're talking about using bots for marketing, because we typically think of bots for customer service, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
okay, but hold that thought, because before we get there, you mentioned there are good bots and bad bots. So
Yeah.
let's start there. What makes a good bot?
The thing about it is if there's ever a level of frustration, we all know that feeling of
Yep.
like, get me the hell out of here, right?
Right.
So, um, for us, I think what's kind of separated us over the years is that, yeah, we teach AI, we teach automation, but we always have good people behind it. That's sort of our mantra is, AI backed by people who care. So, if people don't have the ability to, and it's not that you need to have somebody there 24 hours a day, because that's a big part of the reason why you're creating a bot. But if there's not a clear path of how are they going to get help from a human being, and it's not making the process easier, right? That's the first thing. Is it's got to create less friction, not more
Got it.
friction. But then beyond that, this is sort of a bot builder signature thing is that especially on social media, is we make the chatbots engaging, right? And we give them personality. And the thing about it is, depending on what you sell, right? Because I think a lot of people just think, okay, well, I'm selling this, $3 widget, and I just want to have an FAQ to save time. That's easy, piece of cake. But a lot of times, like for example, we've got a lot of people who provide coaching services, or
Right.
who flip houses or do things that are expensive and high end, right? And let me give you a perfect example. All right. And this is kind of creates a parallel, and it shines a light on something that people don't think about when they think about these experiences. Many years ago in Columbus, Ohio, I was flipping houses, and we would put up all these bandit signs all over town, and they would say, "Hey, call us, 323 sell." And we'd get three, four, five calls a day, right? And then we went to this conference, and this guy said, you know, whenever you put a phone number, put the words 24-hour recorded message below it. Okay. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I want to talk to a person. The minute that we put the words 24-hour recorded message below our phone number, all of a sudden we went from three, four, five calls a day to our phones literally blowing up. Okay. Now, to me, that was counterintuitive because I thought, well, people want to talk to a person, but then I stopped and thought about it. Well, it's like, a lot of times people don't want to talk to a person.
Right.
So what they would do is they would call 24-hour recorded message. I'll find out what this is about. And what that is it's a foot in the door. Okay.
Right.
It's a step in that direction. They're engaged. And so when somebody would listen to the 24-hour recorded message, then it would say, hey, click one to be recorded to a person, click two to leave a message, right? So even though there was this extra step, there would be way more conversations that happen because that's the hardest thing is just to get somebody to engage in a conversation.
Sure.
Okay. So now fast forward today, I have no idea if that still works, by the way, that was many years ago. But now let's just say somebody's flipping houses. Okay, cool. I got a phone number. I don't want to pick up the phone and talk to the stranger about the fact that I'm divorcing my wife and behind on payments and all this kind of stuff. But if I've got now as a real estate investor, a cool, unique way to say the AI home buyer, like learn from a chat bot if we can sell your house, get a fair offer instantaneously. Well, now I've got a cool, unique hook and angle to get people started in the conversation. And what's great is, like, say, for example, you're running, because you can put your bot on, like I said, Facebook Messenger, Instagram. And what's cool is let's just say you're running a Facebook ad and somebody clicks on a button, they can instantaneously be communicating back and forth with your chatbot. And what we did is we would build in a lot of personality into these things. So we'd have fun, animated GIFs and, just crack little jokes and do little things. And to your point earlier, there's you can set up a basic chatbot on a lot of these platforms in a couple minutes. Okay. But it's just, you could also go a lot deeper if you wanted to. So for example, when we sell chatbots to real estate investors, we've integrated it with a system that pulls comps, right? So when it gets an address, it'll say, okay, great. How much were you hoping for your home? Well, and it literally will negotiate, right, with
Wow.
the homeowner. And we've programmed it with language to say, hey, look, I'm just a bot, right? But I know, Bob, and he wants a win-win deal, but that sounds like it's probably going to be a little bit more than he could pay. Is there a number that's a little better that I could go back to him with? Okay, great. That sounds good. And it'll literally like begin negotiation and quite frequently get somebody to drop their price from that first number that they throw out, right? So is the bot going to get a contract and flip a house? No way, but can it start a conversation and then not only, collect the needed information, what's your address, what's your email, what's your phone number, but also create a level of bonding and rapport. And that's what people don't
Mm.
really fathom, because it's like, okay, what's the alternative? I land on a website and I fill out a web form. Okay, that's kind of cold. And then by the time, you pick up the phone and call somebody, they don't even remember who the heck you were or what your website was. Compare that to the experience that we build in these automated chatbots where it's like, it's cracking jokes and, like we ask the question, how fast do you want to sell your house? And they say as fast as possible. And then we have a response that comes back and says, well, that's perfect because using our latest, greatest technology, we can buy your house as fast as yesterday. And then we show an animated GIF of Back to the Future. And then it's like, oh, I'm just kidding, but just know that we can buy as fast as that you want to move and da 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 da. So it's by the time somebody gets on the phone with you, now it's not this like, hey, who are you? It's like, dude, your chatbot is kind of a riot, and it's a very unique, creative experience.
It reminds me of the Southwest Airlines, how the Southwest Airlines flight attendants used to be. They're not so much anymore,
Yeah,
but they'd always make jokes. They'd always have that interaction, and they actually made it because Southwest is not really a fun way to fly because I mean, let's think
sure.
about it. You get into a line to determine where you're going to sit, and you have to fight over the seat and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
right? And yet you get on, and then they make it fun,
You
right?
got it.
So I think that's interesting. So I get that. So I presume that then you go, what's the goal? The goal is to get them into a live conversation. I would presume in
That's it.
that
You got it.
situation,
In that
right?
situation, sure.
Right. Okay. Now let's talk about marketing because the goal of marketing, of course, is get them into, get the lead and get them into being a prospect, right? Convert
You
them
got
from get the lead and get them into being a prospect. So
it.
how
Yep.
do you use it from a marketing standpoint? Is that where social media comes in or is it somewhere else?
That's a lot of ways that you could use it. Absolutely. So, for example, and all of these platforms have slightly different functionality. But as a general, on all of the platforms that allow chatbots, which include WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and I'm hoping maybe LinkedIn in the future. But all of them have some functionality that's the same. One of those functionalities is if somebody sends you a message, your chatbot can reply, right? Another one
Yeah.
is if somebody leaves a comment on a post, a story, a reel, whatever piece of content, if somebody leaves or a comment on content, your chatbot can send them a message. So it's basically imagine you can take your bot and just in all of these different places, just have entry points such that, oh, okay, somebody left a comment. Let's have the bot respond. What's really cool is you can have a link, like for example, on a Facebook Messenger link where you could, you know, send an email and somebody clicks the link and then they get into your chatbot experience. Or you could post it on social media, you can put it in a text message. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of create as these entry points. But the big thing about it, and this is I really want to be super clear on this. The most important thing, and I think this is where a lot of people go wrong, is not trying to fool people into thinking that it's a real person,
Right.
right? And this is a very common, it's like you want it to have a human-like experience, but you don't want to try to bamboozle somebody
Right.
because
Right.
th- th-
That's just bad.
but it's what most people do just because they don't know better. And what we do is the opposite is we take the opportunity to create a personality
Yeah.
because then people want to engage with it. Like I'm going to be and we are on the example of real estate investors, right? If I'm talking to a person, I used when I flipped houses, when you're having a phone call with somebody and you're like, how fast do you need to sell your house? They're never like, as fast as possible, right? Because they think that they're negotiating. So they're like, hey, it's not a big, and we're not in a big rush. Well, deep down, they're like, need to sell, yesterday, literally. So when people get into this communication with a chatbot, with a character, with a personality, now they're opening up a lot more and they want to have this communication. So just don't just do the right thing. And what's funny is now there's laws that
Right.
in certain states where if you're
You have to
trying to fool
identify that
people,
that it's a chat bot. Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
because now there are chat bots that can actually do sales calls, right? I mean,
which was my next point. And Tom, my perspective on it is that and this is not a knock on I know people, who are in the space. I personally don't like the outbound phone dialers with AI. because I don't like it. You know, like I don't ever want to give somebody an experience that I don't like. So maybe
Right.
that's just a preference. But the other thing to realize is that when you're doing auto dialing like that, there's a very strict rules and
Yeah.
regulations. Number one is you got to have somebody's permission to do that.
Yep.
And and it's not that you know, the FTC and these regulatory agencies are necessarily, you know, going to take the time to crack down on, you know, somebody at small scale, but it's the penalty for breaking these rules is significant. So when it comes to voice bots, we don't mess with the outbound stuff,
All inbound.
but the inbound. So if you've got a local business and it's imagine that a perfect example, a mentor of mine owns a hair salon. Phone rings during the middle of the day, right? It's either, you know, one of these stylists is leaving their client and answering the phone, or it's they're paying somebody to sit there all day, or right. And it's just everything that they were trying was just a wreck. Not to mention if somebody calls after hours, that's just a potential, they're gone. I mean, you know, I mean, that could be a client for life
Right.
that found your ad, heard about you, did whatever. And what are they doing? Well, they're just calling the shop down the street that's open an hour later than you are,
Yeah.
and you just lost you know, a significant amount of revenue. So what you can do with these voice agents, and our platform does this as well, is you can set up the rules where you know, and this is the kind of thing, it does help, you know, to get help from a company, you know, like ours or somebody else. But the good news is you could figure it out, especially with AI, right? We just learned that today. If you didn't know how to set up a voice bot, I would go to Chat GPT and say, I'm setting up a voice bot, help walk me through this. But just imagine you go to it and just like a typical you know, phone system where you set rules and you say, okay, during the hours of 9 to 5, we want it to ring 3 times, and then we want it to, and you can set up rules that you wouldn't even imagine and have the sophistication where this AI, and it can run on all the same training data that we talked about earlier, Tom, right? When we talked about it read your book and it, you know, and it's got a bubbly personality, whatever information that you want to put in. And with the right system, AI voice can not only answer questions intelligently, it can collect information, right? Like, hey, let me get your email and I'll send you the details, send out information, and even book appointments, right? So,
Right.
hey,
Right. Oh, I have a buddy who uses this, and his business is recruiting. And and literally I've heard his AI conversations.
yeah,
You cannot tell it's not it, that it's AI. You literally cannot tell. And you know, I think you should let him know that it's AI,
yeah,
that hey, this isn't, you know, I'm your AI voice bot. You know, I'm your AI
yeah,
helper or whatever.
for
And
sure.
you know, I'm going to kind of walk you through this. But
Yeah,
you know, people are kind of, I think, a little more used to this because I mean,
yeah,
think about how many people have conversations with Siri, right? I mean, the most
totally.
famous voice bot in the world, right, would be
Yeah,
Siri. And think about how many people. I mean, people actually get in trouble for having long conversations, right? I mean, it actually
yeah,
creates problems for them. But so I think it's a little more common. A question I've got is, let's take our mutual friend Robert Kiyosaki. Okay,
yeah,
so I'm gonna invoke Robert today. Let's say that he was you know, he was going to use a voice bot in his business. Would you use his voice? Or would you use some other voice? I actually think what voice you use is very important. I know that my friend who does the
yeah.
recruiting, he's actually found that a female voice with an English accent is the most successful.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. A female voice generally does better. Part of it's going to come down to the sophistication of the platform that you're using. So, for example, you know, we sell a very powerful tool that's very affordable for small business. And truth be told, we couldn't put Robert's voice on the system just, you know, because it's a limitation. But are there enterprise level things that would cost you
Well, yeah,
thousands
I
and
mean,
thousands of
yeah,
dollars a
I mean,
month? Sure.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
hey, Jen can do your whole,
Yeah,
your whole face
making
and
the
everything is
voice
an
is not,
example,
yeah,
right?
that part is super easy. But what I would generally do is just, choose a female voice. The thing about female voices is females like female voices and males like female voices, and
Yeah.
it's just, much more nurture feeling. But yeah, you bring up a point of being able to kind of create AI clones, and these are, you know, early level conversations that we're having, and I hope to be doing this, with several personalities in your circle. The thing is, when it comes to creating these sort of AI clones, there's use cases that are absolutely great, right? So, for example, um, when you get into we've got an all-in-one sales and marketing platform, right? And there's a ton of, training around, okay, hey, how do I make a sales page and how do I send an email? And, the reality of it is, am I going to do this training? No, right? Could I have somebody else do it? Sure. But at the same time, a lot of times people want to see my face. I want them to see my face. And when there's changes, I like the idea of not having to go and
Right.
like have anybody, you know what I mean? Like, hey, go
Right.
record this for the 58th time.
Right.
Whereas now we have it where it's like, oh, okay, we changed this thing. Okay, AI, rewrite the script to reflect this change, stick it in, and then it just spits it out. And there's nobody that thinks that it's me and all these things, and we're teaching people AI as we go. So there are definitely use cases where having AI clones makes a difference. But I just want to and Tom, I'd like to make this point because I think that a lot of AI gurus, and maybe I'm sensitive to this just because we've been doing this for a long time, and all of a sudden everybody's an AI guru,
Right.
which I get, but it seems like everybody is very much on the train of use AI and fire your employees,
Yeah.
and that it kind of bothers me on a deep level for a couple of reasons, because it's like, you know yes, we what we teach with chatbots is kind of another level of AI, because it's things that are automated, but all of that stuff, what is that doing? It's creating more opportunities, which means you need more people, that are going to be doing the sales and the
Right.
leads, etc. But then even if you think about it on this very, very basic level, if somebody who is using chat gpt, okay, let's just say that, and here's the thing about it, right? What's we With the prompting and the stuff that we taught on this call right here, you're already going to be way more effective. And just knowing that half the battle is just getting in there and using it, right? It's just a habit. Get it on your phone, get it in your browser, just be working with AI all the time. But I don't think it's a stretch to say that somebody properly empowered with AI and AI tools can be twice as productive and produce at a much higher level. So I would just be like, why in the world would you think that is a good idea to have less people when all of
Yeah.
a sudden
Why not just increase productivity? I mean, I give you a perfect example. So years and years ago, I broke up with a business partner, and half the clients went with that partner, and all the staff stayed with me. And
Mm,
so I'm talking to my senior manager, who then became my partner, and I said, "What do you think? Do we fire half the staff, or do we just get more clients?"
yes,
And we go, well, it's hard to train stuff. Why don't we just get more clients and be more productive? So to me, that's what this is all about, right? Why
100%,
not
yes.
be more productive? Could the world be more productive? Oh, for heaven's sakes, yes, the world could be more
Sure.
productive, right? And then, especially in a profession like mine, which has fewer and fewer people coming in, and we just have more and more work to do. Let's just be more productive, right? We don't have people to draw from. We can't just go out and hire everybody we want. It's just
Yeah.
not that easy. So what I do like, though, is I also like the idea of replicating yourself, because there are, if you've made the effort to actually be known in your industry, and you're recognized. Now, Robert's recognized everywhere he goes. I've been with him in Romania and had him stop 3 times on the way into his hotel, right? So
Wow.
that is how, I mean, he's an A-lister, right? I'm like an F-lister, right? I'm like way down the line, but I still get stopped,
Sure.
right? And people, and a lot of times people are just recognizing my voice because they hear this podcast, or they've heard, they've seen me on YouTube or whatever, and they go, oh, that's Tom's voice, or they listen to my book, right? So that's like 15 hours of listening to Tom. I'm not sure why anybody would do that, but people, thousands of people do that every month. It's just like, whoa, that's awesome. You want to listen to me that long. But my point is that to be able to replicate myself, I think is a really big deal, because,
Absolutely.
we all have our own uniqueness to the world. And I think that the more we can get our uniqueness out to the world, the better off the world is. I truly believe that, because we have our own, I believe we have our own tribe. We just, not everybody in that tribe knows where to find the tribe, right?
Mm,
And so, our job is to actually go out and gather that tribe together. I really think that's,
I like that.
that's a lot of it. And because we want to be around certain people, and there are people who want to be around us, and they may just not know that they want to be around us, and we don't know we want to be around them, right?
Mm.
And so, to me, using these voice bots and face bots and all of this stuff is a way to replicate ourselves, and I love that idea. So, as we wrap up, I think this has been super practical. Thank you so much, Matt. Tell us where we can go to get more information about bot builders.
Well, what's really exciting, Tom and I are going to put together a little training course where we're going to take these topics and go a little bit deeper, get specific on additional use cases, things like video, et cetera, but then also talk more about, okay, if you want to get a chat bot, what's the action steps? How does it work? So if they go actually to botbuilders.com/Tom, just botbuilders.com/Tom, they'll be able to join that free training and really, just get it crystal clear of what's the next steps and where do we go from here.
Awesome. So thank you, Matt. Thanks everybody
Yeah.
for listening, watching. Um, I think this is such an amazing opportunity. Um, we all want more hours in the day, and guess
Yeah.
what? Now we have a way to do it. And
Absolutely.
that's to me, like, we used to say, well, there's only 24 hours in a day. Now you go, well, wait a minute, there could be like 120 hours in a day if we use AI the way that it's possible to use it in the right way, so that we enhance customers' experience instead of detract from their experience. We take away the friction, we don't add the friction. And when we do this, we're always going to make way more money and pay way less tax. We'll see you next time on the WealthAbility Show. Thanks for listening to the WealthAbility Show. If today's episode gave you a new perspective, remember this: the tax law is not your enemy. It's a roadmap. And when you know how to follow it, you can build real, lasting wealth. If you're a business owner or investor who's tired of overpaying taxes, the WealthAbility Accelerator is your next step. You'll have the opportunity to work directly with me for 80% less than my standard rate. And I'll personally guide you through how to change your facts so that you can change your tax. Go to wealthability.com/bonus and apply today. Remember, it's not just what you make, it's what you keep.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.